6 years together. I thought what we had was something special, something rare, something most people never achieved. Because it was comfortable, predictable, stable. We didn't have the drama I saw in other people's relationships. No screaming fights, no tears over misunderstandings, no emotional roller coasters. We had calm. We had routine. We had what I genuinely believed was maturity. Two adults who'd figured out how to do relationships right, while everyone else was still fumbling through the chaos. I'd look at my friends with their tumultuous relationships and feel quietly superior. They'd call me crying about something their partner said, something that hurt them or confused them, or made them question everything. They'd go through cycles of passionate connection, followed by devastating distance. They'd break up and get back together, have explosive arguments followed by intense reconciliation. And I'd think, we don't have to deal with that. We're past all that messy stuff. We've evolved beyond it into something more stable, more adult, more real. I wore our lack of conflict like a badge of honor. When people asked how things were going, I'd say, we never fight, with pride in my voice, like I'd achieved some relationship pinnacle others could only aspire to. We were the couple people pointed to as having it figured out. No drama, no big fights, no chaos. Just peaceful coexistence. Two people moving through life together without friction. And for a long time, I believed that was the goal. I believed that's what successful long-term relationships looked like, except comfort wasn't the same thing as connection. Stability wasn't the same thing as passion. And calm wasn't the same thing as intimacy. We didn't have drama, that was true. But we didn't have depth either, or real vulnerability, or genuine emotional intimacy. We had routines and shared space and 6 years of accumulated habit. We had the appearance of a relationship without much of the substance. But I couldn't see that yet because I was so focused on what we didn't have, conflict, that I failed to notice what else was missing. I started realizing, slowly and then all at once, that our stability was just fear of being alone dressed up as compatibility. We weren't together because we chose each other every day, because we were excited to build a life together, because we couldn't imagine being with anyone else. We were together because it was familiar, because changing it felt harder than maintaining it, because being alone felt terrifying, and this felt safe. Not fulfilling, just safe. Not joyful, just comfortable in the way old shoes are comfortable, worn in, broken in, requiring no effort or thought. I was terrified of dating again. The thought of putting myself out there in my 30s, of using dating apps, of going on first dates and making small talk and figuring out if there was chemistry, of being vulnerable with strangers. It felt overwhelming, exhausting, impossible. I'd been with him since my mid-20s. Dating had changed. I'd changed. The idea of starting over, of learning someone new, of risking rejection and heartbreak, I couldn't face it. So I held on to something lukewarm and called it love. He did the same. We never talked about it explicitly, but I could feel it. We were two people too scared to be alone, mistaking our mutual codependency for connection, our shared fear for partnership. Neither of us wanted to face the world alone, so we clung to each other, not out of genuine desire, but out of desperate need to not be single. We were using each other as shields against loneliness, emotional crutches that had become so familiar, we'd forgotten what it felt like to stand on our own. Our conversations were entirely surface level and had been for years. We talked about what to have for dinner, which show to watch, whose turn it was to do laundry. We talked about work in the most generic terms. How was your day? Fine, busy. We'd discuss logistics and practicalities and nothing that mattered. I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a conversation that went beneath the surface, that touched on hopes or fears or dreams or anything real. We existed in parallel, coordinating schedules but not actually connecting. Our sex life was scheduled and perfunctory, like another item on the to-do list to check off. Usually Saturday nights if we weren't too tired. Sometimes Wednesday if one of us initiated out of some sense that it had been too long. There was no spontaneity, no passion, no real desire. Just routine physical intimacy that felt more like maintenance than connection. We'd go through the motions, both of us knowing what to expect. what the other liked or at least tolerated. And afterward, we'd roll over to our separate sides of the bed without much said. Our weekends were completely separate. He had his hobbies, gaming with friends online for hours, playing golf on Sunday mornings, watching sports I had no interest in. I had mine, meeting friends for brunch, yoga classes, reading in coffee shops, going to museums. We'd come together for a scheduled dinner, often just picking up takeout and eating in front of the TV, and that was our quality time. Two people living separate lives under the same roof, intersecting for meals and logistics and scheduled sex. Roommates who occasionally touched each other. But I kept thinking, isn't this what long-term relationships become? Don't all couples eventually settle into this kind of comfortable routine? The passion fades, everyone says so. The excitement dims. What's left is partnership, companionship, shared life logistics. I looked at my coupled friends and they seemed the same. Coexisting more than connecting. Managing households more than building intimacy. Staying together more out of habit and shared investment than genuine desire. So I accepted it. Told myself this was normal. This was what mature love looked like. I stopped trying to have deep conversations because they felt forced, awkward, like I was trying to manufacture something that wasn't naturally there. I'd attempt to talk about something meaningful and hit a wall of disinterest or shallow engagement, and eventually, I just stopped trying. Why force depth when surface was all that was available? Why exhaust myself reaching for connection that clearly wasn't reciprocated? It was easier to just accept the superficiality, to stop expecting more, to make peace with what was. I stopped initiating meaningful time together because when I did, he'd just end up on his phone anyway. I'd suggest going for a walk, doing something together, having an actual conversation, and he'd agree half-heartedly and then scroll through social media while we walked, or check his email during dinner. His physical presence meant nothing when his attention was always elsewhere, so I stopped suggesting. Stopped trying to create connection. Stopped expecting him to really see me, to be genuinely interested in me, to want to know me beyond the surface-level roommate version he lived with. Sometimes doubt would break through the acceptance I'd carefully constructed. I'd be lying in bed next to him, both of us on our phones scrolling through other people's lives, and I'd think, is this really it? Is this really what I want for the rest of my life? Two people who barely talk, who share space but not intimacy, who've built a life together that feels more like cohabitation than partnership. But I'd push the doubt away because examining it too closely meant facing uncomfortable truths I wasn't ready to face. I'd watch romantic movies and feel this strange ache, this longing for something I couldn't quite name. Not the Hollywood drama or unrealistic perfection, but the real connection they portrayed. Two people who actually wanted to know each other, who were genuinely interested in each other's thoughts and feelings, who looked at each other with warmth and presence. And I'd think about my relationship and realize we hadn't looked at each other that way in years, maybe ever. But I tell myself, movies aren't real life. That kind of connection is fantasy, that I was being unrealistic. Friends would talk about their partners with such genuine affection, such warmth in their voices. They'd share little moments, something funny their person said, a thoughtful gesture they made, a way they showed up during a hard time. And I couldn't think of anything like that to share. Nothing my partner had said recently that stuck with me. No gesture that felt meaningful. No moment of real support or connection. I'd make something up or stay quiet and wonder what that silence meant about what we actually had. I started noticing couples out in the world who seemed genuinely connected. Not performing for social media, just existing together with what looked like real affection. Couples who actually talked to each other at dinner instead of both being on their phones. Who laughed together, touched each other casually, seemed to actually enjoy being in each other's company. And I'd feel this strange combination of envy and denial. Wanting what they had while telling myself it was probably just the early stages, that eventually they'd end up like us. That connection like that doesn't last. Then a friend fell in love, and I watched the transformation. She glowed in a way I'd never seen before. She talked about her new partner with such excitement, such genuine delight, and I watched how they were together. Her partner genuinely interested in her thoughts, asking questions and actually listening to answers. Excited to see her, present with her in a way that was palpable, looking at her like she was someone precious, someone fascinating, someone worth paying attention to. The kind of presence I realized I'd never experienced, and sitting there watching them together, I had this crushing realization. I'd never had that. Not with him, not with anyone. Not even in the beginning of our relationship, when things were supposedly new and exciting. We'd started comfortable and stayed comfortable. We'd never had that spark, that genuine interest in each other, that desire to really know each other deeply. I'd settled from day one because I was afraid no one better would come along, afraid I'd miss my window for partnership, afraid being alone was worse than being with someone who saw me as convenient rather than captivating. I'd confused safety with love. The feeling of being safe, of having someone predictable and stable, of knowing what to expect, I'd called that love, when really it was just fear management. I was managing my fear of being alone by staying with someone safe, someone who required nothing of me emotionally, someone who wouldn't hurt me because he'd never have the access to hurt me, since we'd never let each other in that deep. Safety isn't love. Safety is just the absence of risk. And I'd built 6 years on avoiding risk, rather than taking the leap into actual intimacy. I'd confused routine with partnership. The routines we'd built, dinner schedules and weekend patterns and who did which chores, I'd mistaken that for building a life together, when really we were just coordinating logistics. Partnership requires actual connection, actual presence, actual care. It requires seeing each other, knowing each other, choosing each other. We had none of that. We just had habit and fear and the comfort of the familiar. That's not partnership. That's just two people too scared to be alone agreeing to share space. I'd confused fear with commitment. I'd stayed for 6 years and called it commitment, called it loyalty, called it being a good partner. But commitment should be a choice made from desire, from genuine wanting, from believing this person and this relationship adds something irreplaceable to your life. I'd stayed from fear, fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of the unknown. That's not commitment, that's cowardice. And I'd wasted 6 years in a relationship that was never really alive, that existed only in the space between both of us being too afraid to face life without the safety net of each other. Fear isn't love, and I was done pretending it was. If you've stayed in something comfortable while calling it love, realized your stability was just fear of being alone, you're not alone in that painful awakening. Many in the comments have shared about confusing safety with passion, routine with partnership, fear with commitment. Sometimes seeing what real connection looks like is what shows you what you've been missing. If this resonates, this space continues for those who've stopped confusing fear with love,